Tammy, one of the many unique things about you is that you have been in two very different industries. And the first one where a mentor approached you and took you under their wing, but later on you found yourself in the exact opposite situation. Can you talk about the value of the mentor in the first situation and when you knew that you needed to find one in the second?
Yeah, so I have, as Siobhan pointed out earlier, I've essentially straddled two completely different industries, being in the scientific discipline, research and science, wearing the white lab coat, sitting at the bench, the whole 9 yards. And now I'm a professional equity partner at an international law firm, which is pretty amazing. So when I first decided I was going to go into science, and I've always loved science. I thought that was what I was going to do since the second grade. Sort of had the same plan, had a plan lined up early. I went and worked in a biotech industry for a couple years, and really loved the business side of things. It's You really need to take a look around and see, how you can transfer skills, and what doors may be open for you. Again, if you just sort of open your eyes. I mean, you can have a plan early on, but that plan usually takes lots of different, offshoots, and that's what ends up being your life, which is fantastic. So when I first decided I needed to go get a PhD, I was lucky enough to have worked with a collaboration with the woman who ended up being my thesis advisor. She had gotten her PhD back in the early 60s, and that was just unheard of back then. I mean, there were very, very few women in science that were getting, women in science, period, much less getting their PhD and advancing on. So, and she was one of a very highly regarded HIV researcher. This was back in the early 90s. I too am dating myself. But, HIV really came around in the mid 80s. And I mean, it's been around for a while, but I mean, the research and the questions, the scientific studies surrounding it really was in the late 80s, early 90s. And I met her, and I was just blown away. And I said, we had a really great working relationship, and she was willing to take me under her wing. And again, I ended up working under her, doing a research project and getting my PhD. And she basically, was teaching me how, as some of my colleagues on the panel had mentioned earlier, how to navigate through the system. Again, thinking I was going to go into business, I didn't need to be on a research project for 7 years. I really needed to sort of get in and get out so I could get on to the next stage of my career. And what was really amazing about her as well was that, again, back in the day when I was getting my PhD, nobody talked about leaving the world of science. The goal was to go in, train the next generations of professors, research scientists. Nobody was training you to go into business. That was going to the dark side. And she was extremely supportive of this choice for me. She was an advocate for me, and again, made lots of introductions to other business people that she had met through collaborations, and she was just amazing. I mean, she, again, sort of helped me lay out the path. And I didn't need to do it in secrecy because I was going to the dark side. She was fantastic. So when I eventually left, I'd met somebody when I was getting my PhD who had left to go to law school, and that opened up a whole new world. I had no idea that something called patent law exists. But as it turns out, the patents surrounding drugs and vaccines and diagnostics and everything that the doctors use to see if you're going to be well or not, or help you be well, is actually surrounded by patents. So I work on a day-to-day basis with a number of scientists. So I went into a law firm because I found out, guess what? They'll hire me directly out of lab, and they'll pay for law school, which is fantastic. But I was going into a world that I knew nothing about, and I, to be quite honest, was flailing around for the first couple of years. I didn't have, it was a smaller office. There were men not that there's anything against men. Some of my best mentors have been men, but there were men that weren't particularly helpful to me in my career. And I really needed to find somebody because it was so bad to a point that I thought I was going to leave for sure. I didn't have the support system, and really didn't feel like I was figuring out what the right way to do law was. So luckily, I'd gotten to work on one project with a partner who was in our Boston office. I was down in DC, And she ended up being not only my mentor, but a very dear friend. And through that, she was probably in her low 50s at the time. I was in my early 30s. And she was giving me business, allowed me to interact with clients, was putting me out there in her place. I was serving sort of as her proxy and was giving me projects that ordinary associates weren't getting at this time. And I really do credit her with, again, sort of laying the foundation, giving me the training and skills that I needed so that when I eventually graduated from law school and went to my current firm, that I was ready to go. When I walked in the door the first day, I said, well, when are you going to make me partner? I know I just graduated from law school, but I have all these skills. And eventually it happened, but with these amazing women that I have in particular, I can really say that I probably wouldn't have stayed in those industries but for the support of these women who had gone before me and seeing people that looked like me being in those positions of power and respect. And I really think it's shaped my career.